Lindsey Graham, is introducing a bill that would ban abortion nationwide past the 15-week point. And he's sort of bucking party leadership on this because, of course, Mitch McConnell has come out and said that he thinks we should just leave it up to the states and have that be that. He made a little bit of a chirp when Roe was first overturned that, hey, yeah, maybe a national ban is something we might look at. But since then, he has backed off of that. And I would assume that a recent momentum shift in terms of midterm polling and certain special elections going the Democrats' way probably gave McConnell and party leadership some pause about going full steam ahead with a nationwide ban. Lindsey Graham came out and did this, introduced a bill that he was sure would not even come up for a vote in the Senate because the Democrats control the Senate, and Chuck Schumer is, of course, not going to bring this up for a vote. But Lindsey Graham did this for reasons that are the subject of some speculation. My suspicion is that Graham did this in order to sort of try and find a sort of sweet spot between appeasing the Christian right base, who is probably not going to be satisfied with leaving it up to the states. These are people who think that abortion is murder. You wouldn't leave murder up to the states, right? You wouldn't say, well, murder is legal in California.
In Texas.
Well, oddly enough, yeah, Texas. Well, Texas is one of these states that actually has a full-on ban in effect right now.
And where I just was. It was very interesting.
Louisiana, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Bourbon Street, like the sex capital of the United States, and pro-choice protesters were going down Bourbon Street.
That's right. That's right.
Of all the places to make abortion illegal.
Exactly. Yeah, Bourbon Street. A lot of pregnancies began on Bourbon Street. A lot of lives began on Bourbon Street.
There's actually a study. I believe today every American has at least one descendant who was conceived on Bourbon Street.
Conceived on Bourbon Street, right. We're all brothers and sisters of Bourbon Street in some way.
Under the skin.
Anyway, what I think he's doing here is sort of throwing some red meat to the diehard Christian right base who, you know, just logically speaking, if they feel that life begins at a certain point before the baby comes out, whether it is conception or 12 weeks or 6 weeks or 15 weeks, then they're not going to be content with simply leaving this decision to the states because, all joking aside, you wouldn't leave a question like murder up to the states. You wouldn't say, you know, if you're anti-murder, you wouldn't say, well, sure, Oregon can legalize murder, and then if South Carolina wants to criminalize murder, then I guess they can do that if they want, right? You wouldn't really be satisfied with that. And so the GOP is in a position where they've been catering to this very, you know, hard right evangelical base for so long now that there's really nowhere to go but further to the right in a certain sense. So he's trying to throw some red meat to them.
That's the trap advocacy always falls into. Once you achieve your objective, there's no place to go but to troll the other side with more and more extreme positions. What else can you do from there?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's not just trolling the other side. In this case, you know, they're actually serious. Like when these evangelicals say, "Hey, abortion's murder," they mean it. They're not fucking. That's their belief.
I'm not saying they're kidding. I'm saying for the politicians and particularly NGOs whose bread and butter come from ginning those people up. The only place you can go once you've achieved victory is further, right? You have to go further and further away from what's actually a mainstream position, which this never was. I mean, not to say never, but the idea that all abortion should be illegal has not been a mainstream point of view in the United States for a very long time. But now that they've achieved it, yeah, I mean, it's not just the politicians. How many political action committees are built around the premise of overturning Roe v. Wade? What do you think? All those people are going to go get real jobs now? They got to come up with new fights to fundraise off of.
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. So, yeah, there's definitely a part of this that is about throwing red meat to the diehard base. But the thing that's sort of sleazy and very calculating about it is that he also, at the same time, is trying to assuage the fears of a lot of maybe moderate independent voters who don't want a full-on nationwide abortion ban. In other words, by introducing a nationwide ban past 15 weeks, what Lindsey Graham is sort of attempting to do is define the point at which life begins for the entire nation, right? He's trying to set a standard. Okay, we're not going to ban abortion nationwide outright. We're only going to ban it past 15 weeks. Now, it turns out 9 out of 10 abortions that happen are within the first 15 weeks. So what he's hoping to do here is make the sort of evangelical base happy by saying, yes, we are taking this national, but he's also trying to send a signal to a lot of moderates that, hey, we're not going to ban this outright. What he's basically saying is that in the U.S., we are going to recognize that life begins at 15 weeks. So he's not so much commenting on whether or not murder is illegal nationwide or not. He's basically just trying to set a national standard for what we recognize as murder versus what we don't. And he's saying 15 weeks is the point. And it's interesting to sort of try and predict how it's going to play politically. I mean, the party leadership seems to not think very favorably of what he's done to them here, because ultimately, if their line is, well, we're going to leave this up to the states, then they don't want this senator going rogue and saying, okay, let's do something more national.
Ixnay
because
on the
that is
abortion
an
nay.
overreach. Right, exactly. But on the other hand, this will put certain Democrats in certain states this cycle in a little bit of a defensive posture here. Like I listened to an interview with Stacey Abrams on some TV show, right? And they asked her, they said, do you think abortion should be legal up until birth, or do you believe in any restrictions at a certain point, in the cycle? Because what Graham is saying is that at 15 weeks, basically the fetus develops consciousness and is capable of feeling pain, and past that point, it is inhumane to abort the baby. And so they asked her, they say, do you believe in any restrictions at all? And Abrams was kind of unsure about how to answer that question because as a gubernatorial candidate in a state like Georgia,
Republicans.
What's that?
It's the other side of what Republican politicians have to deal with when they're asked, do you believe there should be any exceptions to banning abortion?
Well, sure,
it's
right.
It's
exactly.
that question where there's just no good answer.
Right, there's no good answer because, if you say, yes, there should be exceptions for rape and incest, then your diehard base says, right, well, if the baby is a product of rape, it's not the baby's fault, so why would you be for this, right? It's still murder, right? So, but, of course, most sensible people think, of course, there should be exceptions carved out for that if you are going to be going as far as to ban abortion, which, of course, you shouldn't. But, Abrams didn't quite know how to answer that question because that's a tough question. It's a tough question for most politicians. It's especially tough when you're running for governor in a state like Georgia, which has a large pro-life base. And there are a lot of moderate voters who probably feel like, yeah, abortion should be legal up to a certain point, but late-term abortion shouldn't be, right? And what Graham has said is that, like, most European countries have some restrictions in terms of when you can and can't terminate. And what he's saying is that, look, 15 weeks, that 15-week mark is basically a mainstream opinion throughout most of the first world. There are several European countries, in fact, most European countries have some laws on the books restricting abortion past that 15-week period. What he doesn't say, though, is that those countries like France and Germany, which he has cited, carve out very broad exceptions for physical health of the mother, mental health of the mother, what the mother's economic prospects are. Is she going to be able to care for the baby? Is the baby going to have a stable home, right? Whereas this law that he floated factors in none of that, right? Right. And so, look, I mean, at a certain point, I mean, if to whoever knows this show well, they know that we don't really dabble in sort of knee-jerk identity politics reactions to things. This is sexism, not in the sense that it expresses an open contempt and hatred for women, but it does express a certain ignorance of what it means to be pregnant, right? And what it does to a woman physically and mentally, and just how that process works in general. You have Lindsey Graham here, a single gay man, who is floating this bill. You see, delayed reaction to that.
Well, because
I thought you took me seriously. I didn't go. I thought you just took it at face value that he's gay. I was saying that jokingly. This guy's sitting here like a stone.
No, what it was, I'm sitting here. I'm like, God damn it! He said pregnant women. How are we going to walk that back now?
Oh, see, so you were. Oh, so I did two faux pas there.
I was like, do I correct him?
I outed Lindsey Graham, and I said pregnant women, not pregnant person. All right, so you, I was one ahead of you. You were still processing the first.
I was still, because I was shocked. Because I thought we were clear on this. That men.
No, but I mean, this just showing ignorance of that, and it shows a certain disregard for any problems that come up. I mean, first of all, I didn't even know what an atopic pregnancy was by name until this issue became foregrounded with the overturning of Roe. I had never heard atopic pregnancy. My wife knew what it was. She explained to me what it was. She used that term, and I asked, what is that? And then she, talked about what it was, and I had heard of, sort of pregnancy complications before.
Isn't your wife in medical school?
Well, she is. She just took her IBCLC exam, which is International Breastfeeding Consultant. So yeah, she deals with pregnancy issues quite a bit, so she knows this subject pretty inside and out. And so this does show a certain ignorance of that. And even in these European countries which have banned abortions past 15 weeks, they almost all of them, not that I'm an expert on every law of every European country, but from what I've read, almost all of them have very broad exceptions. Whereas, okay, if you find out there's something terribly wrong with the fetus past 15 weeks, you can choose to terminate the pregnancy. This carves out no room for that because it's ultimately just a fucking political. It's a cynical political ploy 6 weeks before the midterms. And so how it's going to work, I don't know. On the one hand, it does put a lot of swing state Democrats in statewide races in tough spots. It forces Stacey Abrams to answer some questions that she's probably not very comfortable answering. On the other hand, it does go further than even Mitch McConnell wants to go, and that's not going to be lost on a lot of Democrats and independents either. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, but I thought it was worth talking about for sure.
Listen, Mitch got on the phone with Lindsey, said, do you know how many TikTok videos we have lined up of teachers out in the middle of Idaho who want to put the whole class on puberty blockers, ready to go for the midterms, and you're putting the focus on this, you jackass?
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that's the danger. Certainly I would think the more voters' minds are on this abortion issue going into November 8th, the better it is for Democrats. And so conventional wisdom has to be that Graham sort of fucked them a little bit here.
He did. I keep saying this, and it's partly because I think I'm tuning in more to the conversation that's being had outside of left media than a lot of people in this space do. The Republicans are winning on every level of this conversation except for abortion. Abortion is really all the Democrats have. And actually, ironically, Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness, that seems to have really helped him. He had a swing with young voters. He was 12 points underwater. Now he's actually 12 points in the black with voters under 45 because of the college loan forgiveness.
Sure. Well, that's what we said.
So those two things are very helpful to them. On the other hand, the right wing is very effectively using a campaign of showing the absolute worst cultural excesses of the left. TikTok is like the worst thing to ever happen to the left because they are having a field day digging up videos of the most batshit third grade teachers you can find and just pummeling the internet and the airwaves with them. And every day that they're doing that is a good day for them. Every day they're talking about abortion is a bad day for them. That's why Lindsey Graham doing that was dumb. That's why McConnell, whatever you think of him, he's shrewd. He understands that. That's why he's shutting it down.
Yeah, right. He knows what's good for the GOP and what's not. I mean, he is a very smart political operative. If an evil one, he's definitely smart. You certainly can't take that away from him.
Come on, man. Look at that. He's like anti-charismatic. He's like an anti-charisma zone. He looks like a turtle, and he's maintained this position longer than his last few predecessors met a pretty bad end holding that job. So, he's got to have some other dark talents to be maintaining that position, given how lacking in any other political skills he is.
Please clap.